Hello, my name is Mara and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Okay guys, so we are starting my little pre-gaming fun for the last Kate Daniels book that is going to be coming out at the end of August 2018. This video is about the first book in that series, and I will have a review for every single book in that series leading up to the release of the last one. So here's the deal. This is going to be a spoiler-free video because, girl, if you have not read this book, please give me an opportunity to sell you on this series, okay? But after this, for a while, all of the videos are going to have spoilers in them. So if you watch this and think, you are right, I need to get my life together, I don't know what I've been doing, I don't know what other life things I've been taking care of, and I've not been reading this series, I'm gonna get myself together and get started on this series, okay? If that's the conclusion you reach, which it should be, after this, don't watch any until you've read along because they're going to have spoilers in them up until we get to the two new ones that released in the summer of 2018. So I will not do spoilers for Iron and Magic, and I will not do spoilers for Magic Triumphs because those are gonna be new books and like I just kind of wanna get the discussion going. But books 2 through 9 are gonna have spoilers. So so let's recap. This video, no spoilers. Books 2 through 9 will have spoilers. Iron and Magic, Magic Triumphs, no spoilers again. Okay, we cool? Okay, so you can keep watching regardless of if you've read this book or not because we're not gonna get into spoilers, but we are gonna talk about why this is my favorite series that is running right now and why I think it should have many more readers than it has, even though it already has a lot. So let's do this. Okay, quick plot synopsis in terms of this specific book and why you should read it, but with caveats. Okay, so we are introduced to Kate Daniels, hence the Kate Daniels series. You will notice all of the book titles have magic and then verb. So the first one is Magic Bites, and what we learn in this book is that Kate Daniels is a mercenary in a, let's call it somewhat post-apocalyptic Atlanta. What basically the magical world that this posits is that Earth goes through different multi-millennia cycles of either having magic or having technology. So what that means is like the last time Earth had magic that was working on it was like biblical times-ish through like maybe the Roman times, and slowly magic died out and what we got instead was technology. So the reason why we were able to advance technologically was because magic was no longer in dominance and it was mostly the technology. Okay, so fast forward to like roughly 2000-ish and whoops, the magic is back. So all of a sudden, like, planes don't work anymore, or cars don't work anymore. Like, all these things that we built out of technology don't work all the time. So what happens is because we're going through a transition period, some days technology is up. And in that case, like, they have Jeeps, and they have whatever, and they might be able to use, like, a car or a phone or whatever. And then other days, the magic is up. And if the magic is up, they may have to use a ley line instead of a car. Or they have cars that like can switch between magic and gas. Or they have phones that can switch between magic and gas. So like that's the kind of world we're living in. So Kate Daniels is a mercenary in Atlanta, with that being the bigger world picture. We learn pretty early on that Kate has some kind of magic happening. In this book, we never fully find out what that magic is, which I think is good and bad. We'll get into it, but we never fully find out what her magic is. What we do know is that she is fucking badass in terms of being a mercenary, like slash PI who can figure shit out. She is an awesome fighter. She is very sarcastic. I find these books very funny. She is very sarcastic and very funny. She's got a very dry sense of humor. She is really knowledgeable about like a ton of different mythologies and like what different magics can and can't do. She also has a very ambiguous past. So we know she's an orphan and that she has a guardian of some kind. We don't learn a lot about that in this book. We also learn that she is very much a loner. Okay. So like she has some allies and some like acquaintances, but she purposely keeps herself pretty withdrawn from people. The kind of impetus to get this book going is that her guardian is killed. He's murdered while he's investigating a certain situation. And basically Kate, who is used to kind of like trying to keep a low profile, has to start getting in the mix of all of these different magical factions in Atlanta to kind of seek justice for his death, or at least find out what happened and solve the case he was working on. So what these books are urban fantasy that have essentially a mystery plot in every different book. And each different book is like based around a different like mythology type. So sometimes you're getting like Russian mythology, sometimes you're getting Irish mythology, whatever. It has a bunch of different mythologies in each book. You're also always seeing a bunch of different of these magical factions of Atlanta kind of pressing up against each other. And as the series progresses, things start to come to a boil because you find out a lot more about what Kate's backstory is, why she's been so withdrawn from trying to interact with people, why she's such a badass, and like why she knows so much about things. So we learn more about that as the series goes on. But in this book, you meet things like the Pack. The Pack are all were animals who have a king, basically, named Curran, who eventually becomes her love interest, which is like, it's set up in this book. That's not really a spoiler, but like they have a lot of back and forth and like will they, won't they as the series goes on. So there's that group. There's the People, and the People are basically like, they use psychic abilities to animate vampires and control vampires and get them to do their bidding. So vampires are sort of like mindless, soulless creatures in this world. They're not sexy. So there's those people. There's the Guild, which is the mercenary group she works for, who are all sort of like, they're adept at dealing with magical creatures. Sometimes they are magical, sometimes they're not, and they're like mercenaries, so they're for hire. There's also this thing called the Order of the Merciful Aid, the Order of the Knights of the Merciful Aid, which is what her guardian was a part of. That's who he was working for when he was killed. And they are sort of like the police of the magical world, but like you learn a lot more about like kind of where they're coming from as the books go on. Anyway, that's sort of like what this book sets up. Let me tell you why you should maybe not read this book, but you should definitely read this series. So the reason I say maybe you should not read this book, here's the thing. This book, even the authors say, is far and away the weakest in the series, just in terms of the style of writing is very much, they don't spoon feed you anything, which is nice. If you don't like it where they just sit down and sort of like info dump on you, that's not what this is. However, because they're trying to play things a little close to the vest, and I think they're wanting you to have a lot of questions about what's going on with Kate, it leaves you with this impression the entire time you're reading this that you're missing something. And you are, but it's purposeful. And however, because of that, a lot of people, including the authors, would suggest that you don't start with this book and actually start with the second book. The second book will give you all the information that you need to continue in the series, but it's much clearer on what's happening, and if you like the second book, you can go back to the first one. So that would actually be what I recommend if you've never read this series. Don't start with this one, start with the second one. If you are somebody who must read things chronologically, I implore you to not start with this, but start with the prequel novella, which is called, let me look it up for you, A Questionable Client. That is the prequel novella that I think if you read that first, you will have a much higher likelihood of being okay with what's happening in this book, because I think you'll get a better sense of some of what's happening in the world. You'll have a much better sense of who Kate is as a character, and I think that it will intrigue you enough that even if there are moments in this book where you're like, what is going on? You'll want to keep going, because please keep going to the second book, because it gets much better in terms of clarity of what's happening. I think you understand Kate and where she's coming from a lot better by the second book. Anyway, in terms of recommending this as a series, that's my plea to you, is that make sure you don't let this book be a barrier to you continuing because you're confused, because I promise you it's going to get clearer. And if you're at all intrigued by the characters or the world or anything that happens in this book, you should absolutely give the second book a try, or start with the prequel novella and go from there. So let me give you some other reasons why I really want you to read the series if you've not read it yet. I love urban fantasy and paranormal romance. Those are two of my favorite things to read. I'm gonna say that this is probably the best, or at least my favorite, version of those types of genres that I've ever read. And that is because I absolutely love that the way that Ilona Andrews, which is a husband and wife writing team, the way they build suspense is not to make the characters have a bunch of dumb flaws that hold them back from doing reasonable things, which I think is what so many of these series have, is that like the main character is just like so up in their own head, but they're super powerful, and like it's just like, get over your bullshit and take care of business. That is not what these books are. Kate Daniels has her shit together about as much as she could by the time this series starts. She is incredibly competent. She knows what she is about. Of course she has flaws. She has room to grow because of her backstory, and I don't want to get too much into it because you should find out for yourself the extent of her backstory. Let's just say that for very reasonable circumstances, she has been extremely withdrawn from society and very kind of like emotionally constipated. So yes, she does have growth that she has throughout this book, but that emotional constipation is never the reason why she makes a dumb decision. And I love that about her. She is tough, and another flaw she has is that sometimes when she is like fighting for people she loves or just in the heat of battle, she can be even like cruel. Like she's pretty hardcore, but she's never too stupid to live. She's never like, oh, I like a boy and it's making me dumb. Like, that is not her arc. What this writing team does is they make her awesome, and then they make the things that she has to deal with even more difficult than how awesome she is. So it's always about, I guess what I'm saying is the conflicts in these books tend to be pretty external in terms of like the overall plot. And I don't just mean that in terms of there's a big bad she has to fight. Like, these are all episodic that are building into a bigger like macro arc. So in every book there's somewhat of a big bad, and you're building up to like the main boss who you learn more and more about in every book. There is always a big bad. That it's an external conflict in that sense, but it's also an external conflict in the sense of it's not like what is keeping her from overcoming the big bad is rarely her shit. And I just personally really like that. I do think you also get some really nice character development in this series. Kate, like I said, has been really withdrawn, so a huge part of these books is her reintegrating with society and figuring out how to do that in a way that she thinks is going to keep the people she loves and herself safe. Like, that is always her struggle, is like, how do I do this in a way that keeps people safe? She is an incredibly loyal friend, and like, you see her loyalty and the fact that that inspires loyalty in other people. She thinks of herself as being, because she has been so withdrawn, she always is thinking of herself as being so cold or so unable to love or like not getting it, but you see by the way that people are responding to her that she doesn't even realize what a good friend she is as time progresses, because like, Kate will cut a bitch. Like, she will not think twice if you're messing with one of her people. She has a real sense of like honor that I think is admirable. Anyway, she's a really compelling character, and it's a world filled with interesting, compelling characters. There's been a lot of like side novellas and side even books and series now from the people in this world, and that's because there's a lot of different interesting places where they could continue to make stories in this world. The authors have definitively said that the 10th book that's coming out this summer will be the last in this main Kate series where she's the protagonist, but they've already started writing some side series with other characters. I think they're going to continue to develop in this world, and that is because they're writing really intriguing characters who are not the main characters, and the world itself is just so cool and has a lot of possibilities. So, all that to say, I think that this is a book that I think that this is a series that has really compelling plots on a book-to-book basis. So there's always sort of like a mystery type plot that Kate and her crew get into and have to solve. I think that they have progressed the macro arc, both of the ultimate, like the biggest boss that she's going to have to confront in this last book. They've been building that in a way that's extremely satisfying, in my opinion. It's so clear to me that they have endgame planned. It is so clear that like they have a vision and a direction for where this series is going. Each book builds on each other in terms of what you're learning about some of the like bigger things that are going on, and like, oh shit, I didn't realize that. This is on a macro level working really well, and on an episodic level very satisfying little mystery plots. And aside from those like bigger kind of like story elements, like I said, I think the character development in these series is really, really excellent. These are romances. Side note, spoilers, I know this is shocking to some people, but these are urban fantasy romances. There is a main couple that get together over time. I think that's handled really well in a way that is satisfying but not over the top or intrusive, and I think you see both of them kind of like learning how to be a couple together because they both have like a lot of things that make that difficult at times. Anyway, I'm gushing. I should be, because I fracking love this series. I really think that if you are somebody who likes urban fantasy, if you like romance, if you are a YA reader who's looking to get into more adult fantasy, I think this could be a nice transition book. There are some sexy times, but it's never anything crazy. Like, I don't even think you get sexy times until like way in the middle of the series. And I think it's, you know, really, it's got a lot of humor to it, which I love. I think, all that to say, I think that this could be a good YA to adult transition. If you like fantasy, if you like mystery, like, read these books. They're so good. And I think that they have a lot of cross-genre reading appeal, which is why they do so well. Like, this is a very popular series, and I think with ample justification. They're well-written genre books that have a vision, a voice, and you should be reading them. Okay, so that's my pitch for the first book, Magic Bites, and also why you should try reading Kate Daniels in general. So I hope I persuaded at least one person. I love these books. If you've read these books, I hope you will join me for this pre-gaming excitement as we get ready for the last one. If you've not read these books, I hope you'll think about picking them up. So I think that will do it for me. If you enjoyed this video, if I have sold you, if I have converted you to Kate Danielism, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that will do it. I hope you're having an excellent day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!